You guys are coming from the farm. Did you feel culturally disconnected from the beach and that whole surf scene?
Yeah, we did. We did. And what we grew up on was, it's just a few acres, and we had, barns and horses, and we were, going to brandings, and we lived right at the base of the Los Padres National Forest. But we didn't grow up on some big farm or ranch. That's our cousins, the Russells, were over in Cuyama, and we were out there, and we just had a little humble spot there. It was part of an old ranch house that was part of the east end of Ojai, a big section there that had been whittled away, and we were kind of the last ranch house standing. Now that area in Ojai is populated, and built out pretty good. But in 73, it was pretty special.
And it's 30 minutes from the beach.
There's close, yeah. But, yeah, we did feel like, the first contest we entered was at California Street, and Keith was in tears after the event because all the kids were making fun of him because he was on a single fin,
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we were riding. My dad didn't know how to put us on anything different, so the boards we picked up were, not up with the times, I think he got second in the event to a guy named Shawn Michaels, and his best wave, he just did a cheater 5 all the way across the inside C Street, and the judges were like, "This kid's classic," and they gave him a score.
Wow.
So we were self-conscious about it for sure.
Yeah.
We'd show up in a flatbed. My dad's smoking and has beer, and when we told him we were serious about surfing, he's like, "What do you do?" And we're like, "We get a surfboard, sponsor." And he's like, "Well, who?" And we're like, "Well, Merrick's the best." And he's like, "Get in the truck." True story. He's like, "Get in the truck. Where is it?" And I said, "Santa Barbara." Well, we found the store, and my dad walked in. He's like, "Well, how these boys get on the program here?" That was like blunt. And we're like walking behind him, and they kind of giggled, and they're like, "Well, we do a team workout. Kim Robinson runs it, and Scott Thomas, and then Al's there, and you guys can come if you want." We had these funny surfboards, and like Jamie George just blowing the back out of waves left and right, like sponsored and everything. And we were definitely self-conscious about that, and they kind of put up with us, but we wouldn't leave. We kept going back. And we went back for a long time, and I'll never forget, Kim and Al were like, "Hey, if the boys want to help sweep, shaping bays, and, we'll give them a deal on boards." And it was a huge moment for us. I'll never forget it. We were Santa Claus Lane. And then, we sort of assimilated. Like, we started dressing like the surfers, and, like, we were watching Tommy get his new Rip Curl wetsuits that were bright, bright orange. And, at the time, in my mind at least, it was like, I loved what my dad did, and I was so proud of him, running excavators and dozers and all that stuff. But I didn't want to do that, I didn't.
Yeah.
So it was like, if Tommy's wearing a fluorescent wetsuit, then I am too, man. Like, I see a little window of chance at this, And so, looking back on it, it's pretty funny how, like, we went from, like, that sort of life, and then just jumped into the surfing. And then, of course, it was the 80s, so it was just like I remember, like, I surfed a PSAA, and Richie Collins, like, gave me his webs, the webs, the gloves with the...
Yeah.
And I just wore those things proudly, man, like... And then it was like... And it was double weird, because in Oxnard, Silver Strand, Ventura, all the way up to Point Conception, like... None of the boys wanted to see that shit.
Right.
So we're already fish out of water. We're already sort of outsiders coming into it, and then we act accordingly. And now that other crew that had accepted us, the black suit, white surfboard guys, are like, "What the fuck are you guys doing?" And we're like, I don't know. I always held that sort of like little bit of an outsider feeling. And my friend Paul Hatter recently was like, "You guys are hilarious. You faked it as surfers, came in, like, got to do the whole deal, and then now you're back to how you started out." And I was like, I never did think about that, but we we faked it as surfers for a long time.
Well, you entered at a point where there wasn't really a path prior. Like the whole thing blew up right when you guys kind of entered the scene in terms of being able to have a professional surf career without just doing contests,
Sure.
you know, to make a living.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
I feel like it was all timing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it could happen nowadays, but it couldn't have happened prior.
It was all timing. It was all timing. And like, so I was a terrible heat surfer, so between my two brothers, Keith and my youngest brother, Dan, like I had the least surfing ability. And then Keith's a darn good surfer. And then Dan, I believe is a real gifted surfer. So I had to hustle extra hard. And then Keith was great. He made it on the tour one year, and then Dan's I mean, they're both good surfers, and Dan has I would say a gift, you know, and he's a good surfer, and so we kind of were blown away with the opportunity, you know. It kind of happened, it wasn't really supposed to for us, and you know, it was Bob Hurley and Paul Gomez came in to us and said, listen, guys, any money you're winning, which is, you know, slim, you're spending it to go to New Guinea or to Chile or to Scotland. And we can tell that's what you guys love. And you like big waves, you know, and like you sincerely like to do that. And we're just going to pay for you guys to do that. It's better for us. And you guys are happier. And it was Paul and Bob. They just said, go.
And that was Billabong at the time.
It was Billabong at the time. And it was like surreal because, you know, we would like spin the globe, you know, for a long time.
What age were you when that Billabong relationship started?
When it started, I would have been 20.
You had already lived in Hawaii then?
I was living in Hawaii.
Okay.
So
let's start with that. What was the motivation to go to Hawaii, and how did that all happen? I mean, and I'm thinking too, and you're pitching it to your dad. Mm-hmm. I mean, how did he receive it? Did he see the potential for a surf career? Could he support that?
So I was playing baseball, and I have my family, the Malloys, are very involved in sports and baseball. And I have an uncle that played in a World Series and a cousin. Both wore World Series rings at Thanksgiving dinner. So early on, I was playing in small schools and pitching and doing really well with that in small schools, you know. And they were like, "Oh, here's your chance for college." But I knew down deep I didn't have what it take. Like my cousin taught me a bunch of junk, you know, and I was getting through. Kids hadn't seen that, so it looked like I was doing pretty good. But I didn't have the heat to. I knew I wasn't gonna make it. I also didn't really have a huge drive for that, but surfing I did.
Yeah.
So it was a conversation over just he and I said I want to do the surf deal. I'm going to go for it. And he he goes, well, okay, well, if you're going to do it, you know, do it. And he lit a smoke. I'll never forget it. And he just says, so you're not as good as the other guys, because he'd seen me compete a lot by then. And I was like, fuck, okay. and with that, if you knew my dad, you know, you knew that, like, this is how it went, you know. And he said, you're not as good as those guys. And I said, yeah, no. And he goes, you're gonna just have to try 3 times as hard. And I said, okay, deal. And that was our conversation. And it was really a gift to me, because whenever I hit a wall or it looked like this isn't going to work, I remember what he said. It was like, oh, I'm ready for this brick wall. He told me. So I've only tried once. He's like, he said, you're going to have to try 3 times as hard. And so and then it just was the timing of the industry and Bob Hurley and Paul Gomez's sort of vision and letting us go. And I like to surf. You know, that's the thing, is I like to surf. I was going to surf no matter what every day. And I was going to go I was going to chase Brock Little and Todd Chesser out to the reefs, you know? And at that time, thank God there was no jet skis and that kind of thing. So it was like at that time in the early 90s, it was Brock and Chester, Shane, Ross Williams, Keone Watson, Noah Johnson, Mark Fu, this boogie boarder from Kaneohe named Kelly, Kirk Bierke, some Aussies would come over, Joel Fitzgerald, and that other goofy foot kid, I forget his name. And then a few other guys. I'm sure I'm leaving some out, but you would be calling guys to go on those days because you wanted another guy to surf with, and it would usually end up being 4 or 5 guys maybe, and the best waves to this day I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
Yeah. And so that's what I was wanting to do, and
so you go to Hawaii when you're 17.
I was 18, yeah.
18, okay.
Yep.
And obviously you didn't have Billabong, you didn't have the backing, so you were just, what were you doing for work? How did you pay for your lifestyle?
Yeah, so I was, let's see, I lived in my car for a little bit, and then I stayed on the east side with Tamaya Perry.
Yeah.
Him and his mom, they were gracious enough to keep me for a while. And I'd saved up $2,000, and at that time, $2,000 can get a kid a long way, and then I...
were your brothers with you?
No.
Okay.
No.
Solo mission.
Yeah. Yeah, they're in high school at the time, And then the Johnsons let me live there for a second. And then I upgraded to... there's a guy, real nice guy named Johnny Theodore that lived at Sunset. And he had a walk-in closet that was killer. And I got it $70 a month. And I had a little car that I have used, like Toyota something. And I made that. And I was getting boards. So I basically would I could make it on that. And then I would sell a board here and there.
Who were you getting boards from?
Sorry, Al.
Was it? Oh, so Merrick was making them here? And
I was still getting Al's boards. That was so great because even though I wasn't a paid surfer, like I was riding beautiful surfboards that worked really well, and I was starting to make a little dent in the thing, and I was surfing in any contest they'd let me into, and sort of made a little presence, I guess. And then Chester and Brock and those guys took me under their wing. Ross Williams and the Hill family, the legendary House of Pain. I started hanging tough there, and I was just riding coattails. And then I went to in Pearl City. There, I went to Leeward College for a couple semesters, and so I told my mom. I'm going to school full time. Can you send me $100? So I definitely called, and I wouldn't call my dad. I called my mom, and we kept him a secret from him. And there was definitely a couple money orders that came through that got me through. But I was very, they knew me first name basis at the pawn shop in Wahiwa.
Oh my God.
Because I was sponsored by Quicksilver. For clothes.
Okay.
So I'd get my boxes and just go straight to like whoever would, buy them. I was selling Quicksilver clothes and CI surfboards, and all I would just do is keep, the ones I absolutely needed, and that was getting me through. It was killer. It was a great deal. And I think in the end, that wasn't really disrespecting the guys that were supporting me because I was able to reciprocate in my own way, and I was giving it all I had, to sort of surf pipeline. And
yeah, you're developing the craft.
Yeah. And then,
so you developed a passion for big waves too, though, right?
Yeah.
That's where that happened.
That was and to this day, that was my favorite part of my surfing life,
Yeah.
Is that period of time where we had those was about 5 waves, that we had, and it was, no support, which made the experience that much more rich.
Sure.
And dare I say, I will say it. I'm fucking 51 now. I'll say, looking back on it, those were spiritual events.